Turn me up just a little bit.
Yeah.
It's that man space vibe.
Step in the zone, microphone check. Russ and Les got the real intellect. Talk smooth like jazz on a late night set. With a convo deep and the topics connect. From the struggles to the wins, they address it with grace. Drop lines so cool, you can feel the bass. Two kings of the craft, and you know the rest. Kick back, pour a drink, welcome to the space. You go chillin' with Russ and Les. You go chillin' with Russ and Les. You go chillin' with Russ and Les. Hang out, cause now you vibing with nothing but the best. Space forever.
Welcome in to another edition of the Manspace Podcast. Now, this is the voice of Russ, and it is the Russ and Company series, back by popular demand. Hey, what we've been doing in the Russ and Company series is I have been interviewing some people from all over the globe, and this episode is no different. Because, see, today I have a special guest from a small town in Brunswick, Georgia, to the global stage. Jim Paulk has spent a lifetime shaking things up. He is a proud graduate of the United States Naval Academy class of 1957, where he served as a naval submarine officer before building a 26-year career with Procter Gamble. And then he pivoted to lead the groundbreaking marine conservation efforts in California, restoring the ocean's fisheries. But Jim didn't stop there. He went on to organize a collection of short stories from his Naval Academy classmates called Shaking Up the World. Men who helped design GPS, men who have walked on the moon, survived combat, captivity, even terrorism. And these men are sharing their stories in this book, and we're honored to have the author of that book here with us today, Mr. Jim Paulk. Welcome into the show. How are you?
I'm doing good. You're so kind. You know, I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the show. I know it'll be a lot of fun.
Yes, absolutely. I have been looking forward to this one for a little while now, and I really want to get into your book, Shaking Up the World. Now, what led you to putting together this collection of stories? Because you get a lot of authors today that may write fictional stories, or they may write their personal stories, but they don't necessarily put a collection of other people's stories together. So what was the reasoning behind putting this book together?
Well, you know, to tell you the truth, I got tricked into doing the first book, Swimming for Our Lives, and
Uh-huh.
I had a friend. We collaborated on some stuff after I retired and started doing articles of fishing magazines, and he said put some of those together and have a book. Well, anyway, I looked at them, and there were about 4 or 5 that were halfway decent. The rest of them were all garbage. To tell you the truth, I was a terrible writer. So, but anyway, when I got done, it was over 20 stories and real life stories, and
Mhm.
some were pretty significant. I even had one in there about our encounter with the Platters. I don't know if you know who the Platters
Yeah.
group is. One of my favorite groups. I'll just tell you that story. I want to tell you one story out of that book, and that's the
Yeah, sure.
Platters. Okay, we were in Branson, Missouri for
Mhm.
a week, and my wife's roommate husband came up from Houston. It's a 2-day drive, and so we had been to a lot of shows and had a really good time, and we always fished a couple of days while we were there. And but anyway, the last day we said we got to go back, eat, go to early show, go back to the room, and then pack. So we went out for an early dinner, and we went to the Cracker Barrel.
Mhm.
And after dinner, my wife's her roommate's husband and I went and sat in rocking chairs on a porch, and the wives went around in the gift shop there. And anyway, a couple of guys came out the door, and one of them said as he came out the door, "Let's go sit in there and play a couple of rounds of checkers." I
Mhm.
looked at him. The other guy had a white cane with a red tip. I jumped up my chair. So first I said, "You can have my chair. There's a checkerboard right here." I said, "Wait a minute." you can't play checkers with somebody that can't see. I said, I'm going to have to referee this match. So we got going
Uh-huh.
back and forth and kidding around. And about that time, my wife's roommate came out the door. She said, you know
Mhm.
who these guys are? I said, I don't have a clue. She says, they're the Platters. I said, oh my
Mm,
goodness, my favorite group. I love to dance to them. Only You was
yeah,
my favorite song ever.
yeah.
Anyway, Rooster was a leader and the base of the group. And Rooster said, have you been to our show? I said, no. He said, you have to come tonight. I said, we can't. We got to go back and pack. We got to fly back to California early in the morning. And he
Mhm.
said, no, you got to come to the show. Anyway, we finally said, okay, we'll come to the show. Give us 15 minutes. He said, we'll get tickets at will call. So we waited. We went to will call. The tickets were there.
Mhm.
And Branson to escort everybody to their seats to get everybody seated in a hurry. So you know where we were? In the very front seat. There was not a row in front.
Wow. Front row.
In the front seat. And the show,
Mhm.
terrific. And
Wow.
at the end of the show, Rooster came down off the stage with two long stem red roses and gave one to my wife's roommate, and then one
Mhm.
to her and danced with her in the aisles. I think he fell
Wow.
in love with my wife. Okay. So anyway, after the show, they said we want everybody to come up to the lobby and take pictures, get autographs, and everything.
Mhm.
And we're looking, there are thousands of people that sit in these auditoriums there.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, there ain't no way we're going to go up that we'll never make it. I said,
Mm.
look, there's an exit door right by the stage. I don't see a guard there. Let's go out that door. So we
Mhm.
went out the door, and who's coming up the sidewalk? Rooster. Where are you
Wow.
guys going? I said, Rooster, we got to leave. We got to go back and pack. He said, no, you got to come up front. I said, there's going to be a line a mile long. He said, no. He grabbed my wife and they went up the sidewalk. I told John, I said, well, I guess we're going up front. So we went up front, got photographs, signed autographs, and
Mhm.
everything. It was just an encounter with the most beautiful people in the world. And we just got
Yeah.
hugs and kisses with all of them. And it was so special. It's one of those things that's never going to happen in life, but it did.
Yeah.
So that was that.
Wow.
That was my part of my first book. And so
Mhm.
after I did that, that was it. I wasn't ever going to do another book. But
Uh-huh.
everybody said you got to do another book. So I decided that the group that I knew that had the most unusual experiences were my classmates. So I decided that I would do a book of my classmates. So I notified them that I was going to do this book. No one said, who the heck are you to do this book? Because no book had ever been done like this in the history of the
Right.
Naval Academy since 1845. Because people have written about themselves, there have been movies and all kind of stuff, but most of them
Mhm.
just about a single person and their life. But this was different because this was, as one editor described it, history at eye level. And that's kind of what it was. And
Mm.
when I told
I
people I
like
was
that.
going to do a story, I'll tell you, they called me up and said, what can we do to help? And everybody glommed in. And this became not my book. This became my class book. This was a joint effort with my classmates. So that was kind of what the precipitated that this book was to do it in. And there's so many great stories in this
Mm.
book that you won't see anywhere else. And they're not bios in here that get boring.
Mm.
They're really unusual stories. And I'll start off by telling you one that I call a fairy tale.
Okay.
Bruce DeMars was an assistant janitor at a bank in Chicago. He was
Mhm.
from a very poor neighborhood. He had absolutely no future, none. But
Mhm.
he had told the guys, the owners there, that, his dream in life was to go to the Naval Academy, but he didn't think there was any way he would go. But somebody owed the bank a favor. They thought enough of him to get him an appointment to Annapolis. So
Wow.
he went to Annapolis. He did well. He went into submarine force, was accepted for the nuclear program, and he advanced to a 4-star admiral. He was one of the
Wow.
top admirals in the Navy. And one of the things I did when I got these stories done, if the person was alive, I'd send it to them and have
Mhm.
them edit it, make sure that it was
Right.
accurate. That was the most important thing, accurate. and then modify it any way they wanted to and send it back.
Hmm.
But I didn't get the story back from Bruce. And I kept saying, "No, Bruce, have you had a chance to read your story yet?" Eventually, I got a phone call from his son. He said, "Jimmy," he said, "Dad has not been doing very well lately." He
Oh.
said, "But I read the story to him." And he looked up at me from the pillow and he said, "I want to buy that book." So, so he really liked it, and unfortunately, he died 2 weeks later after that.
Oh,
But I love that story because it
mhm.
is a fairy tale that someone
Yeah.
can go from basically poverty to one of the top admirals. He was the director of nuclear reactors. He was
Wow.
he was in that job for 9 years, but there was
Mhm,
nothing in the book about what he did. The story was janitor to admiral. That was the
mhm.
story.
Now, is that the story in the book that means the most to you when you go back and look the book
You
over?
know, it does. You know, I knew Bruce, so a lot of these guys I knew really well, and some
Mhm.
of them I just knew a little bit. But I'll tell you my favorite story. Okay,
Okay.
do you know who Walter Payton is?
Yes, of course. Mhm.
Okay, well,
Sweetness.
Bob McElwee served as an official in the NFL for 27 years. He's the only
Yes.
one that's been a head referee in Super Bowl in 3 different decades. And anyway, when I announced to the class I was going to do the book, Bob called me. He said, "Jimmy, you want some stories from the NFL?" I said, "Oh boy, what I
Mm,
like NFL stories." So he sent me some,
mhm,
and he said, uh, "I had a number of things I had to do before the play started." He said, "I'm as a head referee. My job is to stand behind the quarterback, and I just watch the quarterback. I don't know if it's a completed pass or touchdown or anything. I watch the
mhm.
quarterback until he's on the ground or the play is over." And he
Right.
said, "I have a number of things I have to do. I have to check the game clock, the play clock, the formations, the substitutions, and a couple other things." He said, "But when I'm in Chicago, I have one other thing to do.
Yeah.
I have to reach around in my back pocket and see if my penalty flag is
Like,
there.
he's still there.
If it's not there," he said, "I go to the huddle, I stand behind number 34, and I
Mhm.
say, 'Walter, give me my flag back.' And Walter pulls it out from under his shirt and gives it to him. And nobody in the stands or
Look.
on television ever see that, knew that it happened. But the guys in the huddle are all giggling, of course. And there are some other stories in the book about Walter Payton, but he was sweetness, and he loved to play football. He was a great football player, and he loved to have fun on the field.
Mm, wow, that is so awesome. Now, when you look back at the book, do you have a book that I guess touches you at your heartstrings? It's a little bit tough to read and go back and revisit these days.
I do have a story that's I have a couple of stories that touches me, and one is about I'm having trouble with names, and I can't even remember my own name right now. But our astronaut, uh, he told me, he said, "I don't want to write my story. I want you to write it for me." And I said,
Okay.
"Well," I said, "how are we going to do this?" He said, "You just we'll get on the telephone, we'll put it on voice, and we'll talk." And I said, "Okay." So I asked my 30-year-old granddaughter who's got a photograph of me. I said, "You come over, and we'll both take a set of notes, and we'll make sure we get as much as we can, and then I'll take those
Mhm,
two sets of notes and make it into the story."
mhm,
So this story was Apollo 16, and it was 3 days on the moon, and it was very special trip. And the thing that was so important to me was the fact that three of us did this story together, including my
mhm.
granddaughter. So I was very touched by that story, and that made so much of a difference to me is the way that we did that, and it turned out well. He sent me 10 photographs from, well, he sent me about 20, and I used 10 photographs in the book from NASA. So there's the photographs of the liftoff and the landing in the ocean, and they had a rover on the moon, and they could only go like 4 miles away from the lander because that's the furthest they could walk with that heavy backpack on. So if the
Yeah.
rover broke down, they had to be able to walk back to the lander. But it never did break down. It was electric, and the
Hmm.
other astronaut drove, and he stayed on the phone and was communicating and taking pictures for NASA the whole time they were riding around it, and they got a lot of good data there on the moon. And in fact, they talked about the Olympics were going on at the time they were on the moon, and they said, "Well, why don't we do an Olympics up here on the moon?" And Bob said, that sounds like a good idea. And he started jumping and hopping, and he's just going to do the long jump. And he said when he was in the air, he realized if he landed on his back, he was dead because he'd break the backpack and he'd be exposed to the atmosphere. So he twisted and landed on his side. And the other astronaut looked at him and said, Charlie, he said, that wasn't very smart. And about that time, NASA got on and said, no more. That
Wow.
was enough. But that was a fun story to put together. There was another one.
Hmm.
I had a woman that called me from Jacksonville, and she said, I ordered a copy of your book. And she says, I'd like to come up and have you sign it for me. And I said, I'd be delighted to. And so she came up for the book signing, and the room was crowded, a lot of people there, and eventually she came up and sat down at the table and introduced herself and said, "Here's the book. Would you sign it?" And I said, "Sure. What would you like me to put in it?" She said, "I'd like you to dedicate the book to my son, who is Spencer Stevens." And I
Hmm.
said, "Sure." She said, "He's going to Annapolis next week."
Oh
And I
wow.
said, wow, she wanted her son to read this book
Hmm.
before he got to Annapolis. And you know what? This is his second year there. He
Wow.
is 6'4", 225 pounds, and he throws left-handed. So
Oh
far
wow.
this year, he's got one win and two saves. But he's a really a good pitcher. And I'll tell you what happened when he got there and he came out to practice. And he said, Coach, I want to some time in the batting cage. I want to hit. He said, no, you're a pitcher. You can't hit. He kept
Hmm.
begging him to let him get in a cage. And finally they said, okay, we're going to give you 4 pitches. That's all you can have. You know
Yeah.
what? 3 home runs.
Wow.
And the coach
That
said,
is awesome.
I guess we'll let you hit. But
That is awesome right
he's
there.
off to a real good season this year, and I think he's
Yeah.
going to be. I think a guy could be a major leaguer someday. There's no question. He's got so much poise and so much talent, and he's a good pitcher for Navy. But
That is
that's a
awesome.
special story, and it touches me because I met his mother, and I'm still
Mhm.
communicating with her. She sends me
Okay.
notes all the time.
Okay. Now, when you go back to your class, yeah, how did you keep in touch with all these people after your graduation? Because I look at it, I was in the army in the '90s, and most of the people that I was classmates with, good friends with, have no contact with them. I think there's probably about five that I still have contact with after all this time. And I mean, I'm in the social media era now, and I still don't know where these people are. So how did you keep in touch with these people, all these
Well,
people?
the,
All these
the Naval Academy, I don't know about the other academies, but
Mhm.
we are very close. And now my friends that went to another university, Georgia Tech or wherever, and they don't know anybody either. but we have a register, and I have a copy that's about 2.5 inches thick, and it's got in there every person since 1845 that graduated from Annapolis. And the
Oh
recent
wow.
classes, it's got their name, their address, and something about them, and their email address. So and I have a special roster just for my class. So we
Mm,
started off in 1953 with 1,160. And 4 years later, we graduated in 57. There were 848 of us that made it.
wow.
Now, today, there are probably about 250 of us that are still alive. And I
Mm,
got a friend in Massachusetts, and he said, Jimmy, we were having this discussion about getting stuff for the class and publishing stuff. And he said, there are probably only 10 or 15% of us today that are halfway competent. He said, we're all either dead or we're dying. I said, well, that's pretty accurate. We're all doing that. And, but I think that's an interesting concept. And
mm.
we do have contact with one another. And I'll tell you this, you won't believe this. We have a monthly Zoom meeting of our class,
Wow.
and
How awesome is that?
usually there are 30 people or so that get on, and
Mhm.
we have people that are all over the country that get on, and it isn't a bunch of medical stuff. We actually have projects that we're doing and things that
Yeah.
we're contributing to the academy, and we sponsor a history professor, by the way. That's our 50th anniversary gift to the school, and the proceeds from our books go to the foundation to sponsor this history professor and teaching naval heritage to midshipmen. And we think
Oh.
that was pretty important. So I don't get anything for these books. It's just been work. It's been a lot of fun and getting to know people.
Yeah.
But the royalties go to the foundation, and that's pretty significant. But we do keep in touch with one another.
Mm,
That's just the way it is. And we
that's
started
awesome.
out as about 35 or 36 in one company, and we had 24 companies. And so those are kind of went down, down, down. We lost. I know in my company we lost more people in Vietnam than any other company. It just mostly
Mm,
airplane incidents.
yeah.
But anyway, that's we do stay in touch.
That is awesome. So, are there stories that did not make the book that are safe enough for you to tell? Because
Didn't get
we
in
all
the
have,
book.
yeah,
Holy cow!
we all have those stories that are not safe to
Oh
tell.
man.
But
I wouldn't know where to start. I just I know I can tell you that I'll tell you a story that happened to me. Okay,
mhm,
I was the company commander, and I'm marching my classmates back from somewhere, and I'm at the head of the column, and all of a sudden the messenger that's with the officer of the deck comes running up and tells me to halt it, and he tells me they're putting me on report because two people in the back of the column are talking. I
mm.
said, "Oh my word!" So I'm going to be on weekend restriction. And my fiance was supposed to come down for a formal dance in Memorial Hall. It was a very special occasion. So, and you know who the officer was? His name was Patton. He was the son of the famous George Patton.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
was George Patton the third, and he became a four-star general. But the Naval
Wow.
Academy and West Point have an exchange program, and they send
Mhm,
one officer to the other school, which is an
mm,
interesting concept and how we maintain a relationship with the other school. But
yeah,
anyway, I had to call my wife and tell her. I said, Pat, I have some bad news. I said
mm,
a couple of people were talking, and I got put on report. I have no idea who they were, but I'm going to be in restriction this weekend. I'm not going to be able to go to the dance, and
mhm,
so we'll have to postpone your trip. So for Saturday night dance, I have my formal uniform on. my white gloves, and my sword. Okay. So
Mhm.
I'm standing at the door as people are leaving the dance. And an officer's wife comes out and she said, "Thank you so much. We had such a lovely evening." And I'm thinking,
Mhm.
that is a bunch of, you know what? I didn't enjoy it. I missed my bat. But that story didn't get in the book. There you go.
So if Hollywood comes knocking and they say, "Hey, I want one story to make a movie from in your book," which story do you think that would be?
There are probably 3 or 4 stories in this book that make a
Oh,
tremendous movie. But
mhm,
I'll tell you one that I think would make an incredible story.
okay,
Walt Mukow was born in 1933 in Shanghai, China. His
mhm,
father was a retired quartermaster from the Navy, worked at the embassy there. And as you remember, the Japanese invaded North China and started marching south. And
mhm,
when the bombs started coming down in Shanghai, the chief decided, I better get my family out of here. So they
mhm,
got on a ship and went to the Philippines. And when
mhm.
they got to Philippines, it was not any better. The Japanese were soon there. The airplanes were dropping bombs. They were strafing. It was just chaos. And in one incident, the air raids, they told them that if the air raid sirens go off, run down the street to the fort down there. That's your air raid shelter. So the air raid shelters went off, and so they ran down the street. And when the all clear was signaled, they came back. And the house that they were living in had taken a direct hit. They had nothing left, not even a change of underwear. They had
Oh,
nothing.
wow.
And the chief, who was supposed to be at work, but he was late and didn't make it there before the alarm went off, went to his place of work. They had had a direct hit, and everyone there was dead. So eventually, the Japanese invaded, and the U.S. Army surrendered. If you remember, there were around 75,000 soldiers that
Mhm,
surrendered there in the Philippines. And you might remember the Bataan Death March, where they will march from one place to another to Bataan for prison. And it was brutal because they lost 10 to 15,000 were dead on that march. That's why they call it the
mhm.
Death March. Well, Walt and his family had found a bus, an old school bus, and half of it was missing. They had one whole side of the bus was out, if you can imagine
No.
that. So they got on a bus, and there was some Filipinos that got on there with them, and they started. They went north, and eventually, and during that way, they had a little bit of food and stuff they shared with the poor soldiers that were marching. And the soldiers had given them some weapons because they didn't want to get caught with weapons. So Walt and his younger brother were taking the weapons apart and throwing them in the jungle. You can imagine that, and riding this bus. And so eventually they got to the other end, and the Americans had surrendered, and the Philippines had all gone, and they were told to go to a certain place and surrender themselves. So when they went to turn themselves in, the Japanese thought that Walter's father was a spy and interrogated him like crazy. But eventually they let him out. And during the Second World War, they were transferred from one internee camp to another. Internees are prisoners of war as civilians, and every time they moved, there was less and less food for them. And when they got to the last one, and towards the end of the war, the army heard that the Japanese planned to execute all 200 of the internees in that camp because they didn't have food for them. So they were just going to kill them all. So they planned a raid, and they coordinated it with the Filipino guerrillas. And they parachuted in, and they marched to the camp. They killed the 75 Japanese guards, and they got the 200 out, and put them in Amtrak that they come across the bay in the water. Amtrak can go on land and water. And they loaded them in the Amtrak and went back across Manila Bay behind U.S. lines. And so they were rescued. And Walt at the time was 13 years old and he weighed 52 pounds. He
Mm.
said he was almost starving to death. But it's an incredible story, and there's a little bit on I didn't cover in here, but that gives you a gist. It's so dramatic and so much action and so much going on. It would make an unbelievable movie, I think. But I don't know whether Walt would want to put it in a movie. That it'd be his
Right.
decision.
Now, are there any personal stories from you in this book?
Uh, Personal story to me. Well, let's see. Yeah, I do. I tell you one. and,
Okay.
and it, it's one. It's a crazy story, and it's called "Possum in the Church." Are you ready?
Yeah. Okay, this
Okay.
sounds good. Go ahead.
So my wife and I were pretty active in the church, and so
Hmm.
the program had gone on and on and on, and the pastor was in his sermon, and all of a sudden the people in front of us were kind of halfway rising up, looking down front, and I thought that was kind of strange, and they did it about 3 times, and I got up, I said, Pat, there's a possum down there in that church. And the pastor stopped his sermon and said, will the ushers come down here and get this animal? And everybody turned around and looked up the aisles. Nobody moved. Ushers were not moving at all. And the
Mm.
pastor said, will you please come down and get the animal? About that time, Pat elbowed me in the rib. She says, go down there and get that animal. I said, well,
Mhm.
man, I had experience with one of these things once, and I had gloves on. He ripped those gloves to shreds. He said,
Right.
I don't know. I said, this is probably pretty stupid, but I'm standing up and I walk down, and everybody in church is watching. And I go down there and I kind of wave my left hand to distract him, and I grab him by the scuff of his neck with the right hand. Okay.
Hmm.
So I'm walking up the aisle, and everybody was terrified. They're watching. They thought maybe I was going to throw it down or drop it or something. And until I went out the door and I walked about 15, 20 yards and I had a conversation with the possum. I said, look, I'm going to let you go, but I don't ever want you to come into church. You're interrupting the sermon. Now run
Right.
off and go find a nice family. So, and I
Mhm.
went back in the church and I sat down, and Pat said, the whole time you were gone, the pastor was talking about you. He told the congregation that you were the best fisherman in Huntington Beach and you were an outdoorsman from Georgia. We went on and on. I said, none of that's true. But I said, that was crazy. But anyway, that was the story. I put it in there just to have something different.
Wow. That is awesome. Listen, so we were talking before the show that you have a new book that is coming out called How I Found Love.
Yes.
Now, tell us a little bit behind the creation of this book and what this
Well,
one is about.
in the first book, I did my love story.
Hmm.
And I think that there is nothing more important in life than relationships, and love is the ultimate relationship. And
Hmm.
I decided, and I feel, I mean, I am so feel so much gratitude to my classmates and my friends, and my friends are the greatest things in the world to me. And I wanted to share some stories about relationships and love because I think it's so important. And it was eating me inside out that I wanted to cover this. So it seems like a strange thing for an academy graduate to be dealing with. I'm a warrior. I'm supposed to be a lover, but I think I'm a bit of a romantic, and so I decided to do this story, this book of stories, and I started gathering stories. Now I'll tell you, 8 authors contributed stories to this book, which is a
Mm,
great honor that they trusted me
yeah.
to do this book and to be a good book and to give me stories for this book. So it's been a lot of fun putting it together. And I guess I have to tell you a story. And
Okay. Yes.
the word agave means, it was a Greek word for love, but
Yes.
it's love only in one direction. It doesn't come back. It's just going, and you do it for love. We expect nothing in return.
Exactly. Yeah.
A doctor and a nurse. This is in 1933, and a doctor and a nurse are in a hospital in a small town in the foothills of North Georgia,
Mhm.
and they're delivering a baby. And the woman was in very bad shape, and the baby is coming out 2 months preemie. And when the
Mm.
baby came out, the doctor told the nurse, put that baby on the table over there. So she did as she was instructed. She put it on the table. And she said, now get back in and help me. She said, we got to save this woman. She's in bad, bad shape. So they struggled and worked, but the mother died.
Mm.
And so the nurse turned around to clean up, and she says, doctor, this baby is alive. He said, no. He said, just leave it. I'll take care of it. She said, no, doctor. He said, look, he said, you can't do anything for that. She said, doctor, I'm taking this baby home. He said,
Oh.
you can't do that. He said, you'll take it home. This baby's going to die and you're going to be devastated. He said, none of the organs are developed. It doesn't really have lungs, a full set of lungs and any organs.
Hmm.
And the nurse said, I'm taking it home. So she wrapped that baby in a blanket and out the door she went. She lived in a very small house nearby with her father and a sister. And that was Nurse Ann, and her sister was Sarah. And the only heat they had in this house was a wood burning potbelly stove. So
Mm.
they put this baby in a tomato basket with a handle on it and put it next to that stove. And they started feeding this baby with an eyedropper every 2 hours around the clock. They took shifts and worked on this baby. And after 5 weeks, the sister of the birth mother came up there to North Georgia and got the baby and took it back to Brunswick, Georgia. Now, this was in the depths of the Depression. And so taking on raising a child was a big expense.
Right.
And this was from both was giving nothing but love to this child. So this child survived, graduated from Glen Academy. He went into the
Mm.
Navy and he served as an enlisted man in the submarine force, came back, went into business, and he survived. He's
Wow.
92 years old today, and he would have been dead on that table. And I'll tell you
Mm.
what, when I asked him to do a story on how he found his wife Patsy, I thought that's what he would write. But this is a story that he wrote for me. And he said, Jimmy, he said, this story has been eating at my heart for over 70 years. And these people, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for these people and what they
Yeah.
did for me. And that was strictly love on their behalf, giving to him. And his name is
Oh.
Bobby Douglas, and he lives in Alma, Georgia, which is probably about an hour and a half away from where I live. But he was a good guy, good friend of mine, and I was shocked when I read his story.
Mm. That is amazing. That is amazing. Jim, how can people find more information about you and your books?
Well, probably the book is on Amazon. So if you go to Amazon and type my name in there, James D. Paulk Jr., or you can type in the name of one of my books. You can type in Shaking Up the World, Shaking Up the World. If you type that into Amazon, it will pop up and it'll also have my biography in there and a little and a lot of reviews. People have reviewed this book and there's
Mm.
some professional reviews. There's two that came out just as regular reviews. One is from um, a professor that couldn't really identify himself, but he wrote a review and it's written up in the regular review column. And there's one in there from the Naval Institute proceedings from the editor there that really didn't identify it. He just put his name on it.
Mhm.
And then there are three reviews that are under editorial reviews. So So there's a lot to see about this book if you want to go and investigate. And if you want to contact me, you can go on Facebook, and I'm Jim Paulk, just at Jim Paulk, or James D. Paulk Jr., author, one of those two, either one of those, and you can get to me. And I love to talk to people. I love to talk to anybody. You see that?
Yeah,
I'm a
that,
talker.
that is fantastic. Jim, thank you so much for spending time with us. Manspace Nation, the book that is out now is called Shaking Up the World, or you can go for what was the title of your first book?
Swimming for Our Lives.
Swimming for Our
And
Lives.
both of those books are in audiobooks. So if somebody wants to get audiobooks, they can do that, or they can get it on Kindle.
You know, it would be helpful if I wrote where people could actually read, because I can't even read my own writing. I wrote this title down. I can't even read. But Swimming for Our Lives or Shaking Up the World, both of those books are out now. And then when does How I Found Love come out?
It's at the publisher right now. It'll be out this spring. So within
Awesome.
a couple months, I've got the first edited edition back, and I'm working on it. And we do 3 rounds of editing, and the cover of the book is done. We could actually send you the cover of that book if you want to. We just worked it, and it's got some kind of muted copies of some items from stories in the book.
Yeah.
There's a monkey in there that's about there's about the rolling monkey, which is an ice cream shop
Mhm.
that couple found out about when they got married and developed it. There's a formula in there because one of the women did one that math led to her
Wow.
husband, and they're just a number of stories in that book that are going to be so different and so exciting. And I said, there's one of them that on the back cover, I said, and kind of unquotes, she is catfishing me. Call the police. And the name of that story is going to be Catfish. And there's just a abundance of stories in here and how people met someone.
Mhm.
There's one that his mother was in rehab, had broken a hip, and he went and visit her every day. And he said while he was there, he said he could hear this one woman walking down the hall. She walked twice as fast as anybody else. And when could hear her coming, he'd always look out the door to try and get a glimpse of her as it went by. And she was the mystery woman.
Mm.
And anyway, that is a long, loving story of how they eventually got together, and they are together now. And both are in their mid-50s and had
Mm.
experiences. Things didn't work out, and they had given up and didn't think they'd ever meet anyone. And here it is, they did. So,
Awesome.
my advice is be ready because you never know. And
You never
all
know.
these different ways that people met someone, it's unbelievable. But I think it will inspire people that maybe their life is not over. Maybe there is somebody out there for him.
Hmm.
And they should just, like I said, be ready.
Be ready. You know what? I think we'll close on that because that is words to live by. A lot of times we meet people and we're not ready. And we sit there and wonder, man, why did I let that person get away? Because you weren't ready for that person at that time. So you got to be ready for when that time actually comes. So, Jim, thank you so much for spending time with us. We definitely appreciate you. Manspace Nation, you know how we do. Every Monday night on WTMS TV, you get the latest episodes of the Manspace podcast. Then on Thursday nights, you get Throwback Thursdays with back-to-back episodes starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And until then, we are out of here.
No gimmicks, just game that my sure in sight. They shine like the city on a Friday night. Man talk, real talk, that's the way that you bless. Giving knowledge and some laughs in the same finesse. From life goes to the jokes that hit. They the tag team champs, yeah, little chick with the wit. So pull up a chair, let the stress digest. From the beat drops, you know the rest. You go chillin' with